Hey everyone, my name is Tony Burke. I'm an AFF instructor and a FAA senior rigger, an SNTA, and private pilot, canopy coach, etc. And today I want to talk about emergency procedures, specifically a question that came up on Facebook recently, which was, is it better to do your EPs, emergency procedures, one-handed or two-handed? And what I mean by that is, when you're going to execute your emergency procedures, do you put two hands, pull the cutaway cable, and then two hands to pull the reserve? Or do you put one hand on each, pull the cutaway cable, and then pull the reserve? Now, my personal opinion on this is that I prefer a two-handed method, and that's generally, I think, what is taught today. It's where I teach, that's what we teach, is the two-handed method. And I think that this is a better way, generally speaking, and my reasoning is this. When you're going to execute your EPs, it's important to do them in the correct order. You want to cut away and then pull the reserve. You have a better chance, I believe, if you pull the cutaway with both hands. Make sure you get the cutaway cable, cutaway handle out and pulled, and then move on to the reserve. I think some of the thinking behind one-handed might be if you pull the cutaway cable with one hand and you have a jostling, your hand's already on the reserve handle so you can pull the reserve. I think there's probably some merit to that. But generally speaking, I think it's probably a better idea to use the two-handed method. Again, just so you can ensure that you get the cutaway cable out before you get the reserve. One thing that could happen is, and I see this all the time with the one-handed method tends to be an older method, probably taught years ago. I'm not exactly sure if it's taught today to new jumpers, but I see people when they're practicing their EPs before getting on the plane, they go like this, bam, bam. And if you have some sort of hang up on pulling the cutaway cable and then you muscle memory it and pull the reserve, then you're going to deploy your reserve without having cut away, and that's a two-out situation, can be very dangerous. But I think what's probably more important than one-handed or two-handed, whatever method it is, make sure you practice them, practice your EPs on a regular basis, are two things. One, do them in the correct order, which means pulling your cutaway cable and then pulling your reserve. Like I said, I like the two-handed method because I think it reduces the chances of having it done out of order. Another thing that you can do to make sure, there's two things you can do to make sure that you don't have an out of order deployment or out of order EP is one, to do whatever method you do, one-handed or two-handed, make sure that you practice it all the time. You want it in muscle memory so that if you do it the other way, it's going to feel extremely odd. It's going to feel weird. That's one of the benefits of doing it in muscle memory. Another thing that I think is more important than one-handed or two-handed is the way that we pull our cutaway cable, the way we pull our cutaway handle. I see a lot of people pull down when they're practicing, and if they do it, sometimes someone will bring a rig in. I had a new jumper bring a rig in for a repack, and when they did, typically I'll have them practice their EPs, cut away, and actually pop the reserve since it's due for a repack anyway, and they just yanked down. That may work for your rig and it may not. This rig I'm wearing right now, I got it about 9 years ago. So I've had it for a while. I've put probably close to 1,000 jumps on it. And even then, the Velcro for the cutaway handle is still pretty well in there. I cannot cut away if I pull just down. I mean, probably in the moment I could pull down and get it out. Certainly some older rigs, you could just yank down and that was more than enough force in order to pull the cutaway handle. But most of the new rigs, if not all of the new rigs, or new rigs built in the last 10 years or later, especially ones that have been well taken care of, require a peel. It's an outward motion with the pivot on the top, and then pull. We want to peel and then pull, because we want to disengage the Velcro before we pull down on the cutaway handle. On both of my cutaways, I remember distinctly reaching with both, I use a two-handed method, reaching both, peeling, and then pulling. One of the problems that can happen is if you have too much force when you're going to execute your EPs, too much force on the cutaway handle and the force on your reserve handle is more than enough, then again, that gets you into a 2-out or out of order EP deployment, and that can be very, very dangerous. So make sure when you're practicing your EPs, if you don't already do this, I 100% recommend, no matter what your rig is, no matter if you have a rig that you can pull down, I recommend adding the peel function into that, or the peel movement into that as well. Because what can happen is if you're able to pull down on your cutaway handle without having to peel out, that might mean that your Velcro is getting close to needing to be serviced. And if it's replaced, it might be a stronger Velcro. You might have a much harder time the next time you have a cutaway. Or if you upgrade from an older rig to a newer rig, or upgrade from any type of rig that you can do just down, and you get a newer rig that requires the peel and pull in order to actually get it out of the Velcro, that can cause a problem. So I think, like I said, I prefer the two-handed method. I recommend the two-handed method. I teach the two-handed method. But I think more importantly are two things. One, you do it in the correct order. So whatever you're doing, make sure that you get the cutaway handle pulled first, and then deploy the pull reserve handle. And then make sure that you're putting in the peel portion of the emergency procedures in with your cutaway. If you have a reserve, now most of us have an RSL or even a MARD, like a Skyhook that I have on both of my rigs. That may not seem as important, but of course you might have your RSL disconnected. It might have disconnected itself. You want to make sure that you still practice the reserve side. If you have a reserve pillow handle, this is a D-ring here, but my other rig has a pillow, that is also probably going to require a peel and a pull. So make sure you're practicing both of those. So when I see people walking up to the airplane, typically old, more experienced jumpers that have thousands of jumps, have been jumping for decades, they go bam, bam. And I wonder, is that actually going to work on that rig? Or is their rig old enough where you can do that? So what would happen if they went bam and then bam? Like I said, that would end up with a 2-out scenario. So just something I want everyone to think about. I would like to see everyone in skydiving, any licensed jumper, to make sure that you're putting the peel portion, regardless of whether or not your rig needs it, because you might rent a rig, you might borrow a rig, you might have a cutaway and someone lends you their rig. Put the peel into that motion of cutting away. So peel and then pull for your cutaway handle, and then for your reserve. Probably also a good idea there as well, because even if you have a D-ring on one rig, you might borrow a rig that has the pillow, and then you have to peel and pull. And just preparing for an instance where the RSL doesn't do its job and you need to deploy the reserve. So let me know if you have any questions down in the comments below, and thank you all for watching, and stay safe out there.